Charmed Life, a radio show discussing spirituality, magic, and the unconditional love of the universe. Thanks for tuning in. And I'm your host, Tricia Carr. I'm so blessed to be here with you today. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, however you may be joining, connecting with this program. You know what? It is a live broadcast, so you can join us live every Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific. If you want to follow me on social media, or if you go to ubnradio.com/channel-1, that is my network. We do broadcast live from the Universal Broadcasting Network studios in Hollywood, California. Sunset Gower Studios. A lot of people who come here say that it's haunted. And that's fine. I don't care. You could say that and you can experience that, and most of the time I don't experience it, but sometimes I do experience it. That's the reality shifting that we all have at our disposal. And so you can join us live. You can call in 323-524-2599. We have the phone lines open. I have an amazing guest today, wonderful intuitive, and we will take your calls to either receive your heart in a story that you want to share in relation to what we are discussing, or if you'd like for us to have a peek in and give some intuitive insight, reflect what's in your heart back to you, because that's truly what intuitive and healing insight is just you recognizing yourself. I would also like to tell you that you can join this by catching up with us on YouTube. YouTube.com/Tricia Carr is my YouTube channel. I post this show as well as other things on that channel. And then please do find us on podcast outlets, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, however you get your podcasts. Download, subscribe, like, review, share. I would really love it if you would do that. And I would like to say hello to the Lightworkers Lab, an online spiritual community of which I am a moderator, a guide, a teacher. You can find the Lightworkers Lab on Facebook by searching in groups for the Lightworkers Lab. This is an online community fellowship resource for education and spiritual expression and development. So do find us there. My friend Crystal Ann Compton is the founder, and you hear me talk about it all the time, so you probably don't need to say much more. But if you are new to this broadcast, go check out the Lightworkers Lab, and I am there every Wednesday offering my my services to you. All right. My website is triciacarcharm.com. And without further ado, I would love to welcome onto Charmed Life. This episode, we're going to be talking about some really powerful topics I think that you all will resonate with. And her name is Nicole Powers. She is a healing artist and an empowerment coach. Nicole, thank you so much for joining me again today. How are you?
Great. Thank you, Tricia. I'm glad to be here.
Your face is just like, it seems like it's not possibly real. It is so, just beautiful by the standards of whatever we call beauty today, but it's more than that. It's more than just the physical composition of it. So much just light, love, joy, and just adorability comes through that face of yours. So you have to watch this. If you're listening, you have to go back and watch, because you have to see Nicole's amazing face.
Thank you.
I know you get that all the time, huh?
I actually really used to hate being called cute and adorable, and now I love it. So, growth is possible, and I embrace my cuteness.
My friend actually the other day, by the way, I'd love to mention that I have a second broadcast, I have a second podcast that I've just started with my partner, Aiden Demarest. We use partner in so many different ways. That could mean my life partner, that could mean my business partner. Well, he's my business partner. He's a host partner and a dear friend, and it's called Enlightened AF. It's not exactly like this show. This show is a little bit more serious, although sometimes I say things that are less serious. But it's definitely a comedy podcast, but also talking about spiritual topics, and we get a little randy. Enlightened AF broadcasts live every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Pacific, and you can find our podcast stream as well, Enlightened AF. But Aiden was saying to me something about, if you were like this gorgeous woman on our show, and he like caught himself, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, you are gorgeous." And I was like, "No, I know what you mean. I'm like girl next door. I get it. It's fine." And so embrace it, right?
Embrace it. Embrace your type. We all have uniqueness, and it's all beautiful.
Yes.
So that's what I had to just step into. Cute is beautiful.
That's right. It's another way to say beautiful. It's just a social construct at this time. Of beauty is a way to say it. I think there's a bit of a lag, so sorry about the awkwardness and the pauses. So anyway, Nicole, you would you tell everyone right at the top here how they can get in touch with you and the kind of work, leadership, services, teaching, guidance that you are providing?
I would love to. So I am an empowerment coach. I am a massage therapist. I do energy healing. And of course, those of you who know me and are very familiar with the Lightworkers Lab, I am a teacher and moderator there as well. I also do intuitive readings. So I have a lot of different things under my belt. All of it, though, is focused on forward motion, healing, and really living your best life. So if you'd like to contact me for any of my services, NicolePowers.net is how you get a hold of me. Or on Facebook, you can search in the search tab the @ Blue Sky Nicole, and that will bring up my business Facebook page and all of my contact information.
Thank you so much. And a lot of people, we're going to be talking about inner child work. And, I know a lot of people are curious when folks come on the show as my guest experts about people's background. A lot of people who are connecting with this broadcast are experiencing awakening, what we call awakening, spiritual awakening. And I know you and I have a similar past so far as being in the evangelical Christian church. How long have you been on what you might consider a path of awakening, or when did you have an awakening experience that was a bit obvious?
Yes. So for the past 8 years, I have been on a journey that feels more home for me. I've tried a lot of different things in my life, seeking God. I've never had an issue with the idea of there is more. I've always just known intuitively that there is a higher power. There is something working for our good. But how I've had practices and disciplines that fit me didn't really occur until 8 years ago. And they came from a really dark place. I was struggling with depression. I was having suicidal thoughts. And I was really struggling with who I am, what I'm doing here, what's the point? And then I found solutions through therapy, support groups, and that's how I started my journey in a way that felt really empowering for me, not trying to follow someone else's formula, but really discovering what works for me.
What kind of support groups were they, if you don't mind my asking, just or any advice for folks for whom that may have piqued interest? How do I find a support group in person or online, or, how do you seek the right one for yourself?
You can search whatever it is that is the issue. And for me, it was definitely divine intervention. I found myself, so I come from an alcoholic family, and I found myself in a support role to some of my family members who attended AA. And I'm not an alcoholic myself. So as I was in an AA room, I was thinking, like, where is this for non-alcoholics? And it got me curious. I want this, but I can't come here. And so I started looking at other 12-step programs. And there's a 12-step program for every topic under the sun. I also joined a trauma group for women who had experienced trauma. And that really, both of those avenues, 12-step and then a trauma group, were what fit me. But it's just about really knowing what's the issue, what are you struggling with, and doing a little research. And also, asking friends, asking people who are in this service field of coaching or mentorship or teaching, reach out to somebody who maybe has resources that you don't know about.
That's fantastic. What I really heard there too, when you mentioned that you joined a support group for women who had experienced trauma, and again finding out that we have other similarities because my family has alcoholism and addiction as well, and there's Al-Anon, which I think is overlooked by many. Al-Anon is alcoholics, the loved ones of alcoholics, and what does it stand for? Alcoholics Anonymous, for the people who are related to them, right? I can't remember what it stands for. Do you remember what it stands for exactly?
Family of alcoholics, but I think Al-Anon is just shortened Alcoholics Anonymous, I think it's just condensed.
Okay. For some reason, that's always how it's referred to for people who are, the support group for family members or, close relatives or close associates of people who are alcoholics. And Narcotics Anonymous is another one. But the one, when you said a support group for women who've experienced trauma, I experienced a lot of trauma growing up, and some of it was physical, but it was mostly emotional, and that cannot be underestimated, the emotional trauma, mental and emotional trauma. And I actually had PTSD for a little while, and I didn't know that. Because we associate some terms with something that is very extreme. We think trauma is really extreme, and you have to have been, beaten up or, it's basically tortured. But, you could actually experience trauma from an accident. Your parents, there could have been an accident that your parents experienced, and it wasn't something that was intentional, and it was like neglect from your parents. There are different ways that we can experience trauma, and also post-traumatic stress disorder that should be embraced. And it's just another way to deepen the insight into the self and compassion to the self, I would say.
Yes. And there are support groups specifically for PTSD. Mm-hmm. There are support groups specifically for domestic violence. So depending on what your experience is, there's a group for you. And, there's a group for people who suffer, families who are going through Alzheimer's disease. I've been to that support group as well when that started coming into my reality. So there's a support group for everything. I think it's just finding your right fit, which can take some trial and error. Mm-hmm. And then one thing that I was taught in my trauma group is that neglect is almost one of the worst forms of abuse. Yeah. So neglect is very subtle. It's very emotional, and it's not about being beat up or having this horrible story. Sometimes it's so sneaky that when you tell your story, it gets missed.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's very insidious. It's very sneaky. And I have someone who's coming to mind, someone who's very close to me, who has experienced neglect. And it is something that this person didn't recognize until probably late 30s, because in a lot of ways, this person's one parent in particular, was wonderful and on many accounts, but there was a lot of essentially blockage to the heart between this person and their parent, and the children experienced this. So it was like there was a wall. There, you could only get so close to this person, to the parent, and that was devastating, really, and it's devastating if you think about it, how long it takes to uncover it. It's almost a mercy that my father beat my mother. You know what I mean? Like, it's really obvious. Nobody can miss that. Of course, there's other things that happened as well. Thanks, Daddy. But there some of that more insidious that creates a deeper wound that is, I guess, deep into the soul, deep into the heart, in a way that is harder to find. And here we are getting right into our topic about how do we experience healing then when it's been going on for so long, if it is later into your adult life? How do we nurse that inner child? And what is inner child work, so far as you're concerned, Nicole? How do you experience inner child work?
So inner child work is a broad term that can mean a lot of different things. For me, what it means is getting to know the child that still exists within me. Mm-hmm. And for me, it looks like children. There's a version of Nicole at every age on the inside who has her own experiences, her own feelings, her own thoughts, her own desires that the adult isn't in tune with anymore. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's about getting to know all the parts of me, all the things I've experienced, and learning to reparent myself. In therapy, one of the things that I was taught is that every parent does the best they can. Yes. And children still get hurt. Yes. Both are true. Even if you have a happy, successful childhood, generally speaking, no parent is perfect, but children are very sensitive. They have their own wants and needs. And from a young age, even in a very healthy home, they're conditioned to behave a certain way and to be more adult-like, probably before they're meant to. And so for me, inner child work is being able to reclaim my own innocence, my own wonder about the world. And really, it's a different way of getting to know God or spirit or higher power from the childlike position, which I think is the best way to get to know your eternal parents, your spirit parents, your creative process with those parental spirits.
That's beautiful. And so do you have specific, I don't know if I want to say techniques or practices to be able to connect? Do you have you set aside time to experience all of those baby Nicoles?
I've not worked with every Nicole yet. I will say that. But there are techniques and tools, and what's great is they're very similar to the things we all do. Well, maybe we don't all do, but many of us do in an effort to walk this spiritual walk. So writing with your non-dominant hand. One of the tools that I teach people is to, as the adult version, as today I'm 36, and so 36-year-old Nicole will ask a question of, let's say, 11-year-old Nicole. And then with my non-dominant hand, I'll write the answer. And I'll just trust what comes through. There are lots of techniques, meditation, where you can kind of go back and introduce the new you, the you today, to your child you. And one of the purposes of this is to build a bond with your inner child, because there are things your inner child did not get that they still need. And you get to be the parent, the loving parent.
Yes, that is the key. That's integration. Sorry, go ahead. Yes. Yeah.
And we all have a critical parent within us, because there are old tapes that are running from our childhood, things we think we should be doing, things we, were taught how we should behave. And so as I get to know my inner child, I also get to know the critical parent in me. And then I get to choose, how did I want to be parented? What would have felt good then? And one of the things that I do today, when I do inner child work, I usually do it because I notice that I'm reacting from a place that does not feel 36. So if something in my life happens and I have a really strong reaction, like I want to throw a fit, I want to roll around on the floor and kick my feet about it, that's not a 36-year-old response. So it's a good indicator to me that maybe I need to take a look at who's in there that needs to roll around the floor and kick her feet, and what does she need right now to feel better.
Oh, yeah, I love that. What comes to mind as we're talking about this, in order to be able to embrace it, some folks who may find this broadcast may think that some of this is so silly, and, there's I guess we have some leftovers from the New Age, as it is called, the New Age movement, sort of emerging in the 60s and 70s and even in the 80s, when people started to tease about this idea of inner child work just being sort of regressive and an excuse to not experience the here and now. But what I want to point out is that if we want to look at it from quantum physical kind of standpoint, or of course metaphysical, that if we understand that there is no cease to energy, the energy cannot be created nor destroyed, if we accept that there is some kind of eternal perspective, that there is an eternal perspective, which I'm sure people that are here are at least curious about, then time is an illusion and all things exist. So 11-year-old Nicole exists, and you're capable of connecting with her because she's still in you. She still exists. And is as close to accepting that absolute reality of the parallel timeline of existence of 11-year-old Nicole, the purer the connection and the more effective the healing can be, as you say, to become that parent. Because that's what growing up is. We have to actually see our parents as flawed and then take over that role. We have to humanize them because they're gods to us when we're children. They must be, because we can't God ourselves yet because we're physically underdeveloped and mentally underdeveloped. We have to get some of that woo-woo in there. We have to get really weird, huh?
I love it. No, when I was thinking about this topic, I thought how seamless it actually goes with the class you taught at the Bliss Retreat with the anatomy of the human soul. Because that, very in-depth class really talks about and addresses the eternal nature, what you just said. And I feel like with inner child work, it can feel very silly, but it's also fun. it can be fun. It doesn't have to be serious. It's when I get to know my inner child, I'm not going back and re-traumatizing myself. I'm not reliving the past. That's not empowering for me. There are techniques that do that, and I'm not going to say anything negative about those. If that works for someone, great. But for me, it's just about embracing the person that I wanted to be when I was little, that I wasn't allowed to be in my home because of what was going on. And I do love that it does give us an opportunity to let our own parents off the hook, because today I'm an adult. I don't need to blame my mom or anyone else that, maybe conditioned me in some way that I don't appreciate. There's no blame anymore. Now it's my turn to discover me and discover what did she want when she was little, and Crystal talks about this and teaches this when you're thinking about your purpose or what you want out of life in a career. What did you play pretend as when you were little? And so it's just it can be a really fun practice. It doesn't have to be very serious, but it does help to move through some of the harder childhood things. And I've done a lot of study on development, like at age 3, what does a kid need? And if I hadn't studied that and I was a parent, I wouldn't know what a 3-year-old needs. I forgot what it's like to be a 3-year-old. So really, parents they're not doing anything wrong per se, but it's a hard job. And it's a hard job to reparent yourself.
That's right. Thank you so much for bringing that up, that it isn't about going in and experiencing and re-traumatizing yourself by witnessing and viscerally reconnecting with the events that were painful. I think that is what actually keeps people from doing this inner work, is that's what the belief is. The belief is that I'm going to look at what's ugly and I have to see it again. But the truth is, you're not going to. Okay, and I will say that, as you sort of alluded to, there are types of, I'll just put in quotation marks, therapy, because I don't believe if it's going this way that it is therapy, that would have you wallow in the pain and re-traumatize yourself. And I'm not necessarily, I actually see that in some what would be traditional cognitive behavioral therapy. Some practitioners, not the discipline or the practice itself or the medical, it's not ingrained in the proper way to administer and guide someone in cognitive behavioral therapy. But there are certain doctors that would kind of lead it in that way, where you're spending so much time in the pain and looking at the pain and experiencing the pain and calling the pain to a visceral reality. That's not what healing is about. Healing is about going to the doctor and saying, where does it hurt? Okay, now let's get to the light. Let's get to the healing part of it. But we do need to see where it hurts first. We can't ignore that. We can't ignore where the pain begins, because that's actually what is perpetuating the injury. You're already at a state of injury. The intention isn't to re-injure that wound. The intention is to shine the light on it so that we can move forward from it. And actually, by the way, I wanted to also say that you mentioned Crystal Ann Compton, who is the founder of the Lightworkers Lab, and you can find her work at crystalanncompton.com. Isn't that her website? Yeah, crystalanncompton.com, ANNE. And to that point of, what is your purpose? What did you do as a child? Because you're kind of purely in alignment with your purpose. And one of the things that I did, Nicole, when I was a kid, was drag around a tape recorder and interview my family, which is kind of funny considering what I'm doing today.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I still have those tapes too. It's really funny. You started to mention about, I was thinking, we can actually experience this kind of inner child work, but we can also do the inner young adult. But the inner child is so important because of the proximity we have as fresh consciousness to what is more natural for us. And we do build this shadow, and we have this conditioning that sort of like is an exponential build at that younger age, between ages from age 0 to 8. We kind of do a big build of this ego, this outer structure of the ego. And then we start to repeat, we start to add layer upon layer in those succeeding years. But this is why that time is so critical. Would you agree? And that's one of the things I love about inner child work, is it does
the Bible says something along the lines, which I'm terrible at quoting the Bible, but that we want to be childlike. And that's an avenue to a deeper understanding of spiritual terms. Because when we come here, we know we're connected. Children are sensitive. They're connected. You hear so many intuitives, mediums, etc., who say, when I was little, this was just normal and natural for me. And someone told me it wasn't right. And so some of us have had the experience where we forgot that we were intuitive, or we forgot that we were connected to God. We forgot that we used to talk to imaginary friends and dead people. And then later in life, we return to it. And so for me, inner child work is about a return to that place of already knowing. And like you said, it's closer. I think when we first get here, we're closer to God, because that's where we just came from, in my mind. So the proximity is, the closeness makes it more easy. And then the further we get away, it can become very complicated. So this inner child work that I do is about simplifying it back down to that innocent, childlike place where I'm free to explore without judgment.
Yes, without judgment. That's fantastic. I want to mention that the phone lines are open, 323-524-2599, if you would like some intuitive insight, or if you want to just talk about something that is kind of stuck, that feels a little bit stuck. We'd love to shed some light or hold some light space for you for that, 323-524-2599. And something that you just said that really resonated is a moment ago you were talking about holding others in blame about the experience that you had as a child. And that's actually really important. I feel like I haven't actually done a 12-step program myself, but I feel like 12-step programs actually address that issue of being able to take responsibility and what taking responsibility means. Because sometimes I think if we think about taking responsibility, we actually think taking the blame. And how can we clean up that energy a little bit? Or how have you, I should say?
So I love the word responsibility, because for me, when I break it down, it really says response able.
Yes.
So I'm able to respond to what's either happened in the past, what's happening today, or my fears about the future. I am capable of that. I'm capable of responding. And so that's the place that when I hear responsibility today, that's how I've had to sort of define it for myself, because especially the child, there's nothing that a child has done wrong. And like you said earlier, when we're children, we aren't capable of caring for ourselves, and we're not capable of stepping into that God role for ourselves. We're very dependent on our parents, so they become our gods. And everything that you can't, if your parent is your source of food, shelter, stability, it's very hard for a child to blame a parent. So what they will do is they'll blame themselves. If I was better, my parents wouldn't behave this way. And that's been a big, long journey for me of undoing that tape, that I didn't do anything to deserve what was going on in my household. It wasn't about me. My child brain thought it was about me, but my adult knows that had nothing to do with you. And so that's half the job for me with my inner child, is reassuring her, you were perfect. You were great. You were lovable. You were, acceptable, and you still are. And we don't have to take on what happened with our parents, because they had their own stuff going on. It wasn't about me.
It's so true, because what being able to take responsibility affords is empowerment. Because if I'm able to respond to my circumstances, and it's been said before in many different ways that it actually doesn't matter what happens. It only matters how you respond to what has happened or what is happening. And if you think about that, how responsibility actually gives you empowerment. You now are the God of the situation, or at least of your experience, your inner experience, which is the reason that any outer experience, that we want any outer experiences, so that we can feel a certain way. We can have a certain inner experience. And the reason it makes so much sense that we actually take that blame when something has gone wrong, when we don't resonate from that as a child, from that pure state of God essence, purer state, every moment that we're out of the womb, we're actually changing and, sort of changing that consciousness, that purity of consciousness. But as the event is happening with the parent that may not resonate with that pure essence, we have to say it is my fault because the parent has the power. That's how it must be, because the parent is physically capable and mentally more capable in this time-space reality. In the world, a child can't be put out on the street and survive. It's just not possible. So the empowerment is actually in place. It's actually a deep wisdom that the child, even though the mental body can't really put it in alignment with what it means in the world, it makes sense that the child says, this is my fault. I have to be the one who is the problem here because the God, the one with the power, must be intact in order for this to continue, right? Doesn't that make sense to you?
Yes. And, little kids run away from home, right? And they run away from home for a variety of reasons. It doesn't even have to be something serious, because for a little kid, they're feeling everything on a 11 all the time.
Yeah.
And so even something that might have been healthy in a home, a kid's reaction could be, I'm leaving, I'm out of here, I'm done with this. But then they go outside with their little backpack and they maybe make it a little way down the street and they realize, uh-oh,
I don't know what to do.
I don't think I can make it on my own. And so they come home and that's just the truth. When you're a child, you can't make it on your own. And so you have to make the household you're in work, no matter what it looks like. And we do all kinds of things to survive, to cope with whatever we were given. And, those coping skills, if not addressed in adulthood, one of the things I did was I used coping skills that I was using as a child that helped me survive in my household. I started doing that in my adult life, and they don't work. They're, a child's coping skills are not the proper coping skills for an adult. And so I had to really relearn how to be an adult. And for a long time, I felt like I was this counterfeit adult. Like I was pretending I was an adult, but I still felt I felt false. I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. No one ever taught me, there was this time in college, which was really hard for me because I wanted out of my home. I wanted to get away. But even as technically an adult at 18, when I went away, it was a shock to my system. I did not know how to live out there.
Wow. It just came to mind when you were talking about that is, feeling like a fake adult, false adult. And what called to mind, or I think what I was hearing Spirit actually poking into my mind, saying this is why we have this epidemic in a sort of broad spectrum of society of denying our age, thinking like prizing being younger. So a person saying, oh, I wish, I'm 44, but I wouldn't disclose my age. I want everyone to think that I'm 29. And that's because of that dissonance inside the self of not actually having the proper coping mechanisms for your age. And so there's this kind of desire to align with an age that is younger so that you can only take responsibility to that degree that you're capable of managing. Have you ever thought of that? That's crazy. It just kind of blew my mind right now.
I have not thought of that, but hearing you say it makes a lot of sense that you would want to be in alignment with where you are in life. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
Right. It's safe. It feels safe. That's why.
Yeah, it does feel safe. Uh-huh. And, youth is exalted in a lot of cultures anyway. So I think that ties into it too, but really being able to be not held accountable. And that's part of inner child work too, is not holding yourself to this standard. So when I was a child, I had to behave more like an adult than necessary, than probably appropriate for my age. And because of that, I have this very high standard of myself. And so sometimes I just need to give myself a break and be able to go play. Today, I love going to play on a swing set. And there's a part of me that would say oh, we don't have time for that, or that's lame, you're 36, you shouldn't want to swing on a swing set anymore. But, my inner child wants to go play. And so I have to let her sometimes just play.
That's awesome. I love that. A lot of people are, they recognize that as a person who is maybe what we call light workers, spiritual seekers, connected to the spiritual experience more than others, or naturally more sensitive or compassionate, and that we do tend to have chosen from that soul perspective, a very dark family line. You shared in this broadcast that you have alcoholism in your family, and so do I. And I have violence, physical violence, deep in my family's bloodline. There's also other things in my family's experience of women being raped, and not by the people inside the family as much as this kind of victimhood, this extreme, overt darkness. And so, I'm sure this comes up for you too with your clients, right? People saying, why do we have that past? Does this come to you? Does this question show up sometimes for you in readings or in counseling sessions?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And it's a question I've asked many times.
Me too.
Because one of the things that I think I believe from where I am right now today, my beliefs change. And so I almost hate to use the word believe, but I get the sense that I chose my family, that I chose this body, that I chose this time, that I chose the country, that I chose. And so there have been oftentimes I've asked myself, why would I choose this? Like, what were you thinking? And the answer that I always come back to is a simple answer, because for me, that's what works. It's probably a lot more in-depth and complicated than I can figure out with my human brain. But what it comes down to me is I believe I came to shift the tide, to stop the cycle, to be the one who steps into recovery or solution. All it takes sometimes is one person to change, and then the family dynamic can begin to change. It's interesting. My family did not enjoy when I started going to counseling. It freaked them out. I started behaving different. They didn't know what to do with me. And today, there is a level of respect between my family members and I that was never there before. They haven't changed. They haven't done any therapy or group support, or, they haven't done a lot of work, but I have. And because I've done that, they treat me differently. It took a long time, but they treat me so much more differently today because I learned how to respect myself. I learned to advocate for myself. I learned how to say no. I learned how to walk away. I learned how to have a God that isn't a family member, lots of things. And so today, my family, we have really good relationships because I took the time to do the work I needed to do for myself.
Because at the beginning, their first response to you pursuing healing the way that you were, they felt exposed, and those areas about them that were painful and that were wounded felt exposed. But you getting on the other side of it to a place of empowerment, and you holding that space for yourself offers that frequency to them, and it actually feels much more comfortable because you're stable and you are offering them by being in alignment with your energy, you're offering them the opportunity to feel that for themselves. So now they can continue to feel exposed as you continue to grow. Obviously, we have free will, but being so secure as you are, then holding that frequency stronger, it's just going to win. The strongest frequency always dominates.
Yes. And they did feel exposed. And I also think that whether it's you, like we talked about in the beginning of this broadcast, that sometimes when you hear inner child work, there's these assumptions that it means re-traumatizing or having to go back and relive something. And for me, that's not what it means at all. But I think my family did the same thing. They thought that me getting help was going to mean a certain thing for them, or that it would mean that I would blame them, or that I would come to them and say, you did this and you did that and it wasn't right. And they would be exposed even more, confronted. And that isn't what healing does. Healing allows you to forgive and release that past and I'm able to see my family members for who they are instead of who they were.
Yes, and there is a difference between, this is another thing I think that fear and ego will try and point out, that releasing the past is completely different. Releasing, being healed and releasing is totally different than denial and repression. That is actually what we're in when we're sort of fostering the wounded state. Being able to release it is because you've actually done that parenting of yourself and you no longer need it. The reason we hold on to pain is like a biological or a functional reason to hold on to pain is so that we can learn how to not create it again. So we can experience that right now. We're intelligent enough, we're developed enough by the time that we are whatever age of adulthood to be able to examine that, learn from it, and then release it as pain. What happens is the stories don't go away. It's not like this was something that was confusing for me when I was trying to move past and kind of release some unforgiveness I had of people that harmed me as a child. It isn't that I have given my stamp of approval to the actions that happened. It's that, and the stories, I was thinking like, well, then I have to like somehow get a lobotomy. I don't understand this. It makes no sense. How can I not feel pain over what happened to myself when I can still remember it? Well, it's like when you are able to actually move past it and release, you release the emotions, you release the mental and physical response to it. And it is though when you remember it, it's someone else's story. It's further away. And that's the distinction. It's still there and we still have it as a cautionary tale. I mean, it's not, we haven't forgotten it. And so anytime we need to learn from it, it's available, but we don't, when we actually, we get to the place of being able to heal the pain of the emotional and physical body, then it's just there as a signpost from the past, like a movie we watched.
Yeah. And I hear one of my clients will say to me, that's what attracted me to you, is that you could talk about your past, but you weren't feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't, there was a time when I could not have this conversation with you, Tricia.
Yeah.
First of all, I would have not wanted to, I would have had so much shame about it. I wouldn't have wanted to say the things I'm saying. And then second, I wouldn't have been able to say it without crying, without feeling the anger that I felt, without feeling hostility for my family, or, there would have been so much baggage in this conversation that isn't here today. And that's what attracts people to this work, is when they see somebody who's done it and you and I can just talk about this like we're talking about the weather. Mm-hmm. Because for us, it really is reclaimed, redeemed. And now my childhood is a beautiful part of my story. It's not a negative thing. When I say I come from a family of alcoholics, I don't have any shame about that. I'm grateful today for that.
That's beautiful. One thing that I think when we're moving through that and finding the answers to the question of why do sensitive, light worker, compassionate, spiritual seeking people as a lifelong purpose, why do they have families that have the darkness in them, the abuse and the trauma? And one stage I think we need to release is actually having pride in the pain. That is something we have to move past. And I just wanted to take a moment to say that it isn't necessary to have an extremely dark family history in order to be a person who helps others. Indeed, we're in a time now where the vibration of the planet has raised, and there are families who are such centers of light as compared to, say, what we're talking about, if we want to make a hierarchy of any sense. And a child coming into a family that is full of light can do a lot of wonderful work and that life purpose as well. And it's what I actually asked this question in, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I received guidance about it when I asked this question. Why did I choose a family that was so dark? And why did so many of my contemporaries choose families that were dark? And the answer that I got was, well, in that time, in that landscape of that timeline, the vibration of the planet was such that it was in that snapshot that there weren't a lot of families that were so full of light that would align with your, let's say, future purpose, the kind of work that we were moving toward. And so then why not just choose the biggest mess to clean up? Like you're saying, if you're going to clean up, if you have a house that's absolutely filthy, you take out the stinking, rotting trash first. You see? Now, if you're going to decorate a home and make it this beautiful space, a sacred space, well, then obviously a clean home is where you start. So now we actually have clean homes in order to make sacred spaces out of. But we just came into a time when the trash still had to be taken out. And so we did go in with this powerful intention to transmute, and we literally transmuted it. So I just want to say, for those of you who are maybe of our contemporary time and you're having children, your children are coming into light, and that's a wonderful thing too. It's a different kind of work. It's a powerful work as well.
Yeah. Every story is important.
Yes.
And it does seem like we have these swings between, we swing from kind of one side of the pendulum to the other side of the pendulum. But the shift is always moving in the highest, best direction for all. That's I love that. I think it's like by the Beatles or something, like, if it isn't peaceful and happy, you're not at the end yet, or something along those lines. Like, the story's not over until there's a happy ending. And I believe that. And so we're moving in that direction. And pain, I think if you've experienced pain, there's a fine line between not denying it, not getting caught up in the romance of the pain. Some of us like to romanticize our pain, and then knowing that pain isn't the only way. Every story is beautiful. Everything is beautiful. So there's no like prerequisite for light work of darkness.
I want to say again, we still have some time left, 323-524-2599. We don't have a lot of time left in the show, but if anybody wanted to call in for some insight, the phone lines are open, 323-524-2599. Yes, there is, and even when we get to the peaceful ending, that's not the end. We take a plunge down the down the slide again, down the roller coaster.
Yeah. It's never over. It's a big spiral.
It is. And for me, because it can seem very confusing as we're talking about that delicate balance of being able to look at the wound without re-experiencing it, to be able to release the pain without repressing it. All these we feel like, oh my gosh, but where do I start? You just start with surrendering to the idea that you can receive healing, giving yourself permission to move toward healing. Really, surrender is also another word that I think that seems scary to people, because it seems like giving up control, and that's the whole problem. I had all these parents who had control of me, and that's the source of my pain. Surrender is different. Surrender is actually surrendering to yourself and to love and to the possibility of that higher power or that experience of healing. Surrender is an important part of 12-step programs, isn't it?
It's a huge part of 12-step programs. And I think it's the first place that there are levels of surrender. Like, I have to surrender over and over. It's not something that you just do one time, but it is willingness and surrender are the two places that any healing journey need to get a start. Just to make a start is just to be willing to do it and surrender to the process. Yes. And to, like you said, to yourself, to love, to the process of healing, because it is a process and it's not an overnight, covering the inner child in 1 hour is impossible. And discovering yours, working with yours is something that takes time and takes a process, which is why I love coaching, because with coaching, you have someone holding your hand through that process. It's not something you want to do alone. I would have never done inner child work well on my own. So getting a coach, or a support group, having someone else help to reflect your truth back to you. That's a really powerful kind of technique. We're using the word powers a lot. Power, because you are Nicole Powers, the empowerment coach. There are no coincidences. That's something you can thank your family for sure. That vibration, that stamp upon your life. And yes, there is. For me,
I love to ask for help from angels. And one time that I had a really visceral moment of surrender was when I was wrestling with that, which I alluded to earlier, about having some unforgiveness for a person who inflicted, played the role of abuser in my childhood past. And I remember pulling over the car and even pounding on the steering wheel and saying, I don't know how to do this, but I just am asking for help. I'm just saying that I want to know how to do this. And then I just let it go. And it's a cooperation with the field, with the balance of everything, rather than being isolated, experiencing the vibration of isolation, understanding that there is actually connection only.
Yes. And I think so many times there are so many things that we don't talk about. And still today, with light work or with new age metaphysical, there's so many topics that are taboo. Sex, there's a lot of things we don't want to talk about. And part of that surrender process is just saying it out loud, that this is what is going on with me. Whether you say it to God, to yourself, to a family member, to a friend, to a mentor, therapist, just being honest with what's going on is a gateway. It just opens the door to so many other things. But if we don't say it aloud, we do stay alone with our own thoughts. Mm-hmm. And there's that Albert Einstein quote about, you can't fix a problem from the space that created the issue in the first place. So my brain isn't going to alone fix the issue. I need help, whatever that looks like.
That's what Abraham Hicks, she always says too. You can't get there from there. When
Yes.
you first say that all the time, I was like, I don't know what she means, because there is the same word. But that's what that's what she's talking about when she says you can't get there from there. You can't get to healing from the wound. I mean, the way out is through, but you can't be asking the wound how to be healed. Is kind of the trick there. And so we move through it, rather than staying and arguing with it and holding the, like you say, I loved that, the romance of the pain, romanticizing it, that is somehow the badge of honor. That is the identity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think for me, I took more of the road of denial than really blasting my pain into this romantic field. But I really thought that once I hit 18 and I left the home, that my childhood, I'd put it in a little box. I'd put it in my closet. Done. We don't need to talk about it anymore. We don't need to, fresh start. And that didn't work for me. And, and then the opposite is true too. If someone romanticizes their pain, I've heard it said, sometimes you have to wade out into the swamp and get your hands a little dirty. You have to kind of get out there in it, but you don't set up home there. You don't pitch a tent in the swamp. You go out in it, do what you need to do, and then you come back out.
Yes.
And the pain, sometimes I need to look at it. I need to interact with it a little bit, but then I get out of there and I don't live there.
Oh, that's so well said. That's absolutely true. Sometimes you got to just walk through it. And that's the nuances of a life experience and the journey.
Yes.
Well, we are actually out of time now. Nicole, I appreciate you so much for coming on. Is this your third time on the show? I think it is, right?
Yes.
Oh, gosh, I appreciate you so much and all the work that you do. Tell everyone again how they can get in touch with you and the services that you're offering.
Well, after listening to this inner child talk, if you want to work with your inner child, that is part of the coaching that I offer. So you can contact me. You can go to NicolePowers.net and see how you can contact me. I do a lot of other services, and we can just talk about what it is you need, and I can come up with a plan for you. And I would love to work with anybody who wants to be on this journey of healing.
I have a message coming through right before we go off from Archangel Raphael saying that there is a great blessing upon your life, Nicole Powers, as well as everyone who is listening today. There is a blessing upon your life. You are watched after, you are upheld, you are uplifted, and you are pulled forward with the force of love. You are moving forward with the force of love in every single moment. You're not alone. You're not separate. You are completely connected, and you have this great blessing upon your life to continue to shed this experience through you and for everyone else. Just connect with the matrix of healedness, because that is your highest truth. That is the only thing that is true about you. And this is your work, and this is the blessing that you shine and that you continue through your experience and through your vibration. Amen. Well, again, thank you so much, and I hope you'll come on again soon, everyone. Many blessings to you. My website, again, is triciacarcharm.com for my services, and I have a lot of classes coming up, so I hope you'll go check that out. Healing Arts Academy under my website, triciacarcharm.com. One more time, thank you to Nicole Powers. Go check out her work at Blue Sky Nicole on Facebook as well. And I love you all so much for joining in, and you can check us out again next week at 11 a.m. Pacific. And I will see you then. Thanks for tuning in. I love you, whoever you are.